general associated with the bank itself, CBA, Commonwealth Bank of Australia. VeriSign Labs conducted some additional study and found that that was not the case. In fact, most of the traffic that already existed for .cba was coming out of a network in Japan associated with the Chiba prefecture near Tokyo, which also uses .cba for internal purposes. This is a classic example, I'm sure repeated hundreds of times all over the world. Installed systems make an assumption. .cba, we can use that locally, Chiba prefecture. Commonwealth Bank of Australia, we can use that globally. We don't think of CBA as local. Look at the data, and you see a collision between the two. The assumptions made by the installed system conflicted with the assumptions that could have been put into practice. But here's the good news of the outcome. First, VeriSign Labs performed a case study in the summer timeframe. VeriSign then contacted the network operator in Japan and said, here's a potential problem. For all the good reasons Commonwealth Bank of Australia would like to use .cba, you're using it internally. Is there something you can do about that? And the operator remediated. The operator changed the internal settings, and you can see the top line graph and the second line dramatically moving lower in the September-October timeframe. But how do you scale that to thousands of systems all around the world? But how do you even begin to understand what assumptions people are making within their systems about the names they can use? How many of those are at risk? Because it's not strictly based on how many queries you see. It's based on how many of those queries are from systems that would be impacted if the answers changed. Next slide. For this reason, among other initiatives in the technical community, VeriSign is organizing a research workshop. You can check out more information on namecollisions.net. We've got an academic program committee to review the papers, and we also have awards for best paper that will be issued there. This is an important topic in the evolution of the domain name industry. It will help with the introduction of the new gTLDs and provide a good, solid foundation for security, stability, and resilience. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We're going to take 1 minute now to move up onto the stage. If the other speakers and Doctor, if you would come, and Taylor. While the speakers are taking their seats, let me do the introductions. Our next speaker will be Sarah Deutsch, Vice President and Deputy General Counsel for Verizon Communications. Sarah covers a wide range of international IP legal issues such as copyrights and trademarks for Verizon, and she's represented Verizon internet policy, internet liability, and jurisdictional issues, and has had a role in shaping the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and also the Anti-Cyber Squatting Consumer Protection Act. After Sarah speaks, Andrew Mack will speak. He's a principal and co-founder of AM Global Consulting, a Washington-based consulting firm that helps companies in emerging markets. Andrew's a former World Bank task team leader and finance professional with experience in more than 80 countries, and he has deep experience in work on public-private partnerships, corporate social responsibility, and technology policy and economic development issues. John Nevitt is one of the co-founders of Donuts, and he serves as Executive Vice President and on Donuts board as well. He is a founding board member also of the Domain Name Association, which is the domain industry's trade association. So with those introductions, I will ask Sarah to begin her comments.
Sure, which one would you like?
That one would be nice enough to hold it.
Okay.
Okay. Is this working?
It is. It should be.
Okay. So I'm going to give you the perspective from a brand owner who did not apply for a new gTLD, and we're not alone. Apparently, many big brands decided that they were not going to apply, whether Facebook or AT&T or Procter & Gamble. This isn't working.
This one is.
This is for the web, and this.
Oh, okay. Is this working?
Yeah, it's working.
Okay. So I guess from our perspective, when you add 1,900 new gTLDs into the root, this increases the likelihood of some problems occurring, problems that we've already faced as a large brand holder with the 22 gTLDs that we already have. So, for example, it will increase the likelihood of cyber squatting, intellectual property infringement, fraud, cybercrime, and consumer confusion. And I guess our biggest concern, and the thing we were hoping for, were some stronger mechanisms once we have all these new gTLDs, especially the ones that are open to the public, to deal with the volume of infringement and the bad behavior, and also the fact that in the new ecosystem, many of the people that we want to enforce against, the registry, the registrar, and the registrant, might all be located outside the U.S., where there really are no remedies like an anti-cyber squatting law that we really only have here in the U.S. So it's going to create some challenges for brand owners to police in all these new spaces. And then on top of that, there are all the costs, defensive costs of trying to register your brand in the new spaces, and a lot of it just doesn't scale. So that's one big bucket of concerns. On the consumer confusion point, we're also very concerned about the decision at ICANN to allow singular and plural variations of the same new gTLDs to exist together. We think that will result, obviously, in consumer confusion. So, for example, there's some arbitration decisions at the International Center for Dispute Resolution, and they found that .sport and .sports were confusing, and those two should not be allowed to exist together. But at the same time, other panels have found that .car and .cars are just fine to exist, and .hotel and .hotels are not confusing, and they can exist together. So that's a big bucket of concern. And then finally, there's this issue about closed generic applications, and Taylor mentioned that there are open and closed applications. So this is a subset of the closed applications that are not applied for by brand owners to protect their brand, but they're applied for by companies to lock up basically a generic word for their exclusive use, whether that's .phone or .cloud or .mobile. So consumers may not realize that when they sign up for a .phone TLD, for example, that registry is just provided by Dish Network and their affiliates, and not by the rest of the ecosystem. So we have filed extensive comments at ICANN about this, and we've been very heartened that both the Government Advisory Committee and ICANN's board have asked and encouraged people to convert their applications from closed to open, and most have, but there's still a few out there, and there's some arbitration proceedings that are happening at the same time. But basically now the burden is on these applicants to show why operating a closed generic is somehow in the public interest. So we don't think it is. And then lastly, I will support Bert's really excellent presentation on domain name collision, which I could not even possibly try to repeat or explain, but just from the very basic understanding of what this is, that before these, nearly 2,000 new gTLDs were ever approved and introduced into the root, servers, devices, and applications all have had existing names. It just made sense to name them something, and if these names wind up being the same as the new gTLDs and they query the internet, then many of these names can leak or collide when the new gTLDs actually enter into the root. And as an ISP, Verizon is very concerned about the implications both for our customers, for large enterprises, but also for small and medium enterprises, many of whom have had their IT systems set up by some unknown person long gone 20 years ago, and somewhere embedded is going to be a problem. They're not going to know about it till the names collide. So the challenge will be locating all of the collisions, telling people about this, somehow expecting them to remediate this. And I understand, the more I learn about this, that the remediations are actually very difficult, and some of them are not easy. It's not just a name change, but Bert can explain further. What we really need to know, and I know there are studies pending at ICANN about this, but what will be the consequences from name collisions, not just counting the numbers of them or trying to do little looks in time at what they might be, but really understanding where the problems are and what will be the consequences, especially if you have voice over IP communications, there's machine-to-machine communications, there are communications that are intended for internal use that could leak to external use, resulting in security breaches. Could there be hacking and other nefarious mischief that come out of some of this confusion? So we're hoping to understand the consequences and make sure that ICANN acts very cautiously before the new gTLDs are identified into the route. And then lastly, I just think that the study VeriSign did in this Commonwealth Bank of Australia is just fascinating, because who would have thought that something .cba would result in domain name collisions? But I just think it emphasizes that we live in a global society. We have no idea what other languages and cultures have named their devices, and we really need to be very cautious and careful looking at this going forward.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. So my name is Andrew Mack, and our firm focuses on what might be technically described as the rest of the world. So my presentation is going to go a little bit outside of Washington and a little bit outside of the lab and talk about the 6.5 billion people who heretofore have not been part of our plans. And the reason I'm talking about it, partly because a lot of the safety and security issues that we're going to see are certainly going to affect those people. Partly because this is where the world is growing, and partly because in the end, we're going to have to sell these things to somebody. And so looking at the fastest growing parts of the world seems to make sense to us. We recognize that the Global South probably wasn't a part of most gTLD business plans. It wasn't part of most people's focus. Very few applications from emerging markets, just a handful from Latin America, just a handful from Africa, for example. And very little promotion aimed at emerging markets, and I can tell you that because I was involved in some of it from the ICANN side, and it was woeful, I think is probably the technical term that I'd use. We know that 78% of all the domains are registered in Europe and North America, 4% Latin America, 2% Middle East and Africa. So give you some sense. However, it's our sense that might be a mistake, or at least might be a missed opportunity. That not all the gTLDs are going to be successful in the North, and that emerging markets are big markets that could be a lot of opportunity as we go forward. So, what makes me think that this is the case? Well, we talk about the current demand. You've got weak CCLDs in large parts of the Global South. But you've also got weak gTLD penetration, which is to say that there isn't a lot of legacy focus on the existing gTLDs. Could that be an opportunity for people who are bringing in new gTLDs? Possibly, right? Comms, orgs, and nets are still very, very well known, but they're not nearly as well known as they are in the Global North. At the same time, you've got this huge increase in the amount of people who are coming online and the amount of focus of getting people online in terms of all kinds of government policy. Online usage, internet usage, Africa up 50% in the last 4 years. Latin America up 20% in the last 2 years. Developing countries, mobile broadband subscriptions doubled in the last 2 years, now outnumber subscriptions in developing countries. So there's a fair number of people, right? Wanted to show you, and I don't know if you can see it from here, but Africa and Switzerland have roughly the same number of domain names. But Africa has 25 times more internet users than Switzerland. You can see that. Now here's the kicker. What's the growth? There are 8 million Swiss. There are 1.1 billion Africans. You do not need to be a technologist to know that there's only so much more that the Swiss can buy, right? Let's take a look at a couple of sample countries, because that gives you a sense of what it's really like out there. Germany, everyone knows Germany. 81.9 million people, 82 million people, give or take. Nigeria, 168.8, so 170 million, give or take. Population growth rate in Germany, anybody want to hazard a guess? 0.1%, basically flat. Nigeria, a little under 3%, not so flat, right? Annual growth rate, anyone want to hazard a guess on this one? Germany, 0.7%, the star of Europe. Nigeria, just a shade under 7% annually. Now, internet penetration in Germany we know is high, 83%. Now a third of all Nigerians, though, 33%, have internet access. More and more coming online as phone service comes in, as all the new phones come in are internet enabled. 10.8% of Germans are under 25 years old, 63% of Nigerians. Here's the kicker from the competition perspective. If you're in Germany, you want a DE, there are 15 million of you, right? 15 million Germans, so that's basically, what? That's one in say 5 or 6 of Germans have a DE. There are 20,000 .NGs for the Nigerian CCTLD. So the point is that there are tremendous opportunities that are out there. We can go on and on. Tablet shipments have grown 111%. Smartphone shipments up 70%. You've got 20 of the fastest growing populations in the world. 16 are in Africa. Let's see. Let's look at some examples of another example of Brazil. 5th most populous country in the world. 50% in internet penetration rate. Penetration rate has doubled in the last 4 years. Importantly, the GDP has grown 10% in each of the last 4 years. The key thing here is that these are the parts of the world that are growing. And these are the parts of the world where there's no legacy competition. And importantly, these are parts of the world where all of the work that we do with these new gTLDs can contribute to their economic growth and also to the growth of the economies, generally speaking, because many of them have the ability to do things for the economic development, the build out of the internet space in these countries. So I have all kinds of other facts and figures that I'd be happy to share with you. But the key thing is, in the north, there's going to be a tremendous amount of competition. In the south, very, very few people have looked at it to this point. We know that there's tremendous demand. We know that the demand curve is like this. It's going straight up. We know that they're not making more people in Scandinavia, but they're making lots of them in places like Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia. And we reckon that regardless of whether or not we're going to focus on the global north, focus on the global south at the same time makes very good economic sense. And then if you add in the safety, security, and other policy issues, it's that much more important. Thanks.
John?
Thanks, David. Anybody? Thanks for having me. I want to thank the hosts and ISOC and FairWinds for inviting us. I won't take too much of your time. I wanted to give a little background of Donuts and who we are and why we love the new TLD program. Essentially, I love that Liz mentioned these signs behind us, waiting,